Gunfire erupted amid the clinking of wine glasses. In a single heartbeat, the lavish dinner at the Ember Room turned into a nightmare. Guests screamed, chairs toppled, and a glass of red wine slid off the table, shattering on the polished marble floor like spilled blood. 5 men entered, not hurried, not hiding their faces. Black coats, cold eyes, every step deliberate. One drew his gun and aimed straight at the center table, where Nathan Cole, CEO of Cole Dynamics, was seated. The soft golden light reflected on his composed face, but his gaze was sharp, a blade ready to strike back. He knew instantly this wasn't a robbery. It was a message. The entire restaurant froze. The wealthy patrons, who moments ago were laughing over $1,000 wine, now trembled under the tables, eyes wide with panic. Amid the chaos, only one woman stood still. Claire Donovan, a 32-year-old waitress. The kind of person no one ever really noticed, a shadow behind crimson drapes. But at that moment, her eyes were sharp as knives. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. One of the attackers grabbed manager Ben Carter, pressing a gun to his head. "Sit still! Anyone moves dies!" The air grew heavy, dense, like the silence before a storm. Claire took a step back, gripping the silver tray tightly. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline blazing through her veins. In her head, a familiar voice echoed, "Control your breathing, Claire. Target, focus, act." The voice of Daniel Donovan, her late brother, the man who taught her to survive, the man who died on a mission she never fully understood. One of the attackers turned, noticing her still standing. "You! Sit down!" Claire didn't answer. She bent slightly, pretending to obey. But as he approached, she swung, the tray cutting through the air like a steel blade. The impact cracked through the room. He stumbled backward, gun flying from his hand. Chaos exploded. Nathan Cole ducked, dodging a bullet, while Claire moved, swift, precise, like someone trained for moments just like this. She pivoted, kicked hard into the second man's knee. A crack, a grunt, a body hitting the floor. It all happened in seconds, too fast for anyone to comprehend. Ben Carter hid behind the bar, watching in stunned silence. The woman he'd thought only knew how to carry trays was now fighting like a living storm. Nathan watched, eyes glinting with intrigue and astonishment. Who was this woman? When the last man cocked his weapon, Claire was already there. She seized his wrist, twisted with perfect precision. A shot rang out, the bullet missing and embedding into the glass wall behind Nathan. She struck hard, dropping him to the ground, the gun now in her hand. Silence fell. Only ragged breathing remained, mixed with the faint clatter of broken glass rolling across the floor. The scent of gunpowder and wine filled the air, sharp, burning, unforgettable. Claire stood amidst the wreckage, shoulders trembling, eyes still fierce. She looked down at the gun in her hand, the same kind of weapon that had once destroyed everything she loved. Nathan's gaze met hers. No words were spoken, only a quiet acknowledgement. Two strangers, bound by a moment where the line between life and death, anonymity and power, had vanished. In that instant, Claire Donovan was no longer just a waitress. She was the storm, the flame that rose in the dark, burning away all pretense, marking the beginning of a story no one in that room would ever forget. The sound of ambulance sirens echoed in the distance, blending with the rain pounding against the glass. Inside the Ember Room, time seemed to stand still. The guests had yet to recover, their eyes fixed on the woman who had just taken down 5 armed men with her bare hands. Claire Donovan stood amid the wreckage, her breathing heavy. The light reflected off the drop of blood smeared across her wrist. She didn't tremble, but her heart pounded, not from fear, but from memory. The smell of gunpowder, the screams, the gunfire, it all pulled her back to a dusty red desert 5 years ago, where her brother, Daniel Donovan, had fallen. That day, she swore she would never fight again, never let the killer's instinct within her rise once more. Yet tonight, it had returned, fiercer than ever. Nathan Cole stepped forward slowly, his voice low and hoarse. "Do you know who they are?" She didn't look at him, replying quietly but firmly, "I know what kind of men they are." Nathan studied her closely, a seemingly ordinary woman, with her hair tied neatly back, her uniform stained with wine and smoke. But those eyes were anything but ordinary. They were the eyes of someone who had seen death and survived it. A young waiter, still shaking, whispered, Where did you learn to do that?" Claire turned to her, her voice soft as the wind. "Not somewhere you'd want to go." The answer silenced the entire room. Across the way, Ben Carter, the restaurant manager, was on the phone with the police, his eyes never leaving Claire. He knew he'd have to write endless reports and answer countless questions. But one thought consumed him. If she hadn't been there tonight, they'd all be dead. A faint groan broke the silence. Mark Russo, the leader of the attackers, was still barely conscious. Claire knelt beside him, her gaze cold and steady. Not that of a nurse or a victim, but of someone who'd seen too much blood to still be afraid. "Who sent you?" Her voice was icy. Mark let out a raspy, blood-filled laugh. "You think you understand the game? You're just a pawn, same as your brother was." The word stabbed into Claire's heart like a blade. She froze, eyes widening. "What did you say?" Mark laughed again, low and coarse, full of menace. "He was right, Donovan. That name rings a bell." Nathan stepped closer, his tone sharp and commanding. "Keep talking. Who sent you here?" Mark only smirked, defiant, saying nothing. But Claire didn't need an answer. She already knew. There was only one man with enough motive and hatred to do this. Richard Hale. Once Nathan's business partner, now his enemy, and the man tied to Daniel's death. The air grew thick with tension. Nathan looked at her, his gaze full of questions. "You've met him?" She nodded slightly. "Not met, but I've walked where he's left his footprints." In that moment, both understood. They were no longer strangers, thrown together by chaos. They were two pieces of the same war. Outside, the sirens grew louder. Ben Carter urged, "Ms. Donovan, you should step out. They'll need your statement." Claire looked around, the terrified faces, the flashing lights, the spilled wine, and Nathan Cole, standing silent, studying her like he was witnessing something rare. She knew she could never return to being the ordinary waitress after tonight. As she moved toward the door, her steps light as rain, Nathan murmured to himself, "Sometimes the quietest souls carry the fiercest storms." Claire paused at the doorway, not turning back, replying softly, "And sometimes those storms don't get to choose where they break." She stepped out into the thick Manhattan rain. From the rooftops, the neon lights cast their glow across her face, cold, resolute, and shadowed with pain that had never faded. Tonight, the ghost inside her had awakened, and the world of power and privilege was about to face it. The next morning, Manhattan awoke beneath a veil of damp mist and the familiar blare of car horns. But for those who had been inside the Ember Room the night before, the world was no longer the same. Outside the restaurant, yellow barricades lined the entrance as police continued gathering evidence. The press called it the mysterious attack on Billionaire CEO Nathan Cole. Inside, under dim lights and the lingering smell of gunpowder, Claire Donovan sat alone, her hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the cracked floor tiles. She had answered dozens of questions through the night, signed police reports, and been allowed to leave. Yet no one could truly leave after witnessing what she had done. The door opened. Nathan Cole stepped in without bodyguards, wearing only a dark coat and his usual calm composure. He paused, studying her in silence. "I thought you'd left Manhattan already," he said, his voice deep and hoarse, as if last night had been nothing more than a failed business meeting. Claire didn't look up. So did I. Nathan took a seat across from her, amid the shards of broken glass. Tilting his head, he observed her more closely. A woman with sun-browned hands, faint scars on her wrists, and eyes that carried a storm within. "I've met many people in my life," he said quietly, "but no one has ever done what you did last night. No ordinary person moves like that." Claire said nothing. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the silence. "Who are you, Claire?" he asked. She gave a faint smile, not out of amusement. "Someone who once swore never to touch violence again. But this world doesn't let such vows last long." Nathan's gaze softened slightly. He leaned back, arms crossed. "I know who was behind it. Richard Hale." The name made Claire finally look up. "I thought so too." Nathan nodded. "He was one of the founding shareholders of Cole Dynamics. I forced him out 3 years ago after discovering he was laundering money and selling defense data. He vanished after that. Until last night." Claire went still. In that moment, she understood more clearly how her brother Daniel had died. He'd been part of the operation tracking the data leaks connected to Hale, and never came back. Her voice was low, steady. "And what is it he wants from you?" Nathan's eyes flickered with irony. "The same thing that makes people die. Power. And something called the Phoenix Drive." She frowned. "Phoenix Drive?" He nodded. "A quantum encryption technology. In the wrong hands, it could collapse the entire global financial system. I'm the only one who knows where it really is." Claire understood. Last night hadn't been a random attack. She hadn't just saved a man. She had stepped into a secret powerful enough to destroy them both. Nathan stood, his tone calm but layered with challenge. "You can walk away now. Pretend none of this ever happened. Or," he stopped, meeting her eyes, "stay and help me end it." Claire lifted her gaze. Their eyes locked, one a fighter shaped by belief, the other a man who believed only in power. 2 worlds apart, yet bound by the same enemy. "I don't work for anyone anymore," she said coldly. "I only do what's right." Nathan gave a slight smile. Not of joy, but of someone who had just found a new piece on the board. Strong, unpredictable, dangerous. Sometimes doing what's right requires someone who knows how to strike. She didn't respond. She stood, slipped on her coat, and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped and spoke softly, like a warning. "If Hale comes back, I'll be there before you call anyone." Nathan watched her go, eyes thoughtful. Outside, the rain had started again. But this time, the storm wasn't in the sky. It was building inside her, the woman the world was about to remember, Claire Donovan. That afternoon, in a small basement room of an abandoned building in Brooklyn, the only light came through a crack in the steel door, slicing the darkness like a blade. On a wooden chair in the center of the room, Mark Russo sat bound, his face bruised and swollen. His wrists trembled slightly, but his eyes still held defiance. Across from him stood Claire Donovan, arms folded calmly in front of her, and beside her was Nathan Cole, cloaked in black, silent as a shadow. No police, no lawyers, no cameras. Only a confrontation between truth, power, and fear. Mark squinted at Claire and sneered. "Who are you?" Some ex-mercenary or Cole's new puppet? Claire didn't answer immediately. She drew a small knife from her boot and spun it slowly, the blade catching the dim light across his face. Her voice was steady, cold, neither loud nor soft. I'm someone who's seen too many men like you die without ever understanding why. Mark gave a raspy laugh. And you think you're different? Everyone thinks they're a hero until innocent blood stains their hands. The air in the room grew colder. Nathan remained silent, his eyes shifting slightly, as if measuring every word and every movement between them. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. I don't care who hired you or who you answer to. I just want to send him a message. Mark lifted his chin, smirking. I'm not a messenger. Claire smiled faintly, the kind of smile that chilled the room. Last night, I let you live. I may not do that a second time. Their eyes locked. In Claire's gaze, there was no anger, only the unshakable certainty of someone who had stared down the barrel of a gun too many times to blink. The silence stretched long enough for even Mark to feel the fear creeping in. Then she spoke again, each word sharp and deliberate. You will tell Richard Hale that the Phoenix Drive no longer belongs to him. It's in the hands of a third party. And if he touches Nathan Cole, or anyone who was there that night, I will release the entire data set to every global financial authority. Nathan's head lifted slightly, eyes widening. She was bluffing. He knew that. She didn't have the Phoenix Drive. But Mark didn't know that. Her unwavering gaze, her calm conviction, and the venom in the way she said Hale's name made her words sound like undeniable truth. Mark snorted weakly, forcing a grin. You're lying. You don't have it. Claire leaned in close, her face inches from his, voice low but sharp as steel. You know I can kill without hesitation. I've done it before. Last night, I didn't. Do you really think I'm the kind of person who lies for fun? He fell silent. The mockery faded from his eyes, replaced by something uncertain. Fear and realization. She spoke again, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You'll tell him that Daniel Donovan's sister has it. His head jerked up. Daniel Donovan? A second passed. Mark's face drained of color. He knew that name. Daniel. The soldier who'd been sent on a classified mission against Hale, officially recorded as missing in action. Now his sister stood before him, alive, holding his fate in her hands. Mark swallowed hard, stammering, What else do you want me to say? Claire stepped back, sliding the knife back into her boot. That's all. He'll understand the rest. He nodded slowly, the arrogance in his eyes gone for the first time. She turned toward the door. Nathan remained still, watching her. You just created a new balance, he said quietly. No one wins. No one loses. But now, everyone fears you. Claire paused at the doorway, her silhouette blending with the pale light in the corridor. I don't need them to be afraid, she said softly. I just need them to know there will be no more victims. The door closed behind her, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts. The woman did not seek power, but by rejecting it, she had just become the most dangerous player in the game. The room fell silent after Claire left. Only Nathan Cole remained, standing in the dim afternoon light, his eyes fixed on the door that had just closed. The air still carried the metallic scent of blood and the cold trace of determination. On the chair, Mark Russo sat slumped, his breathing heavy. The words, Daniel Donovan's sister, as it echoed in his mind like a slow drumbeat. A memory surfaced, a report about a failed mission, a fallen soldier, and the man who once paid him. Richard Hale. Now he understood. Hale was no longer the only one giving orders. Nathan exhaled slowly, stepping toward the dust-streaked window. Outside, rain fell steadily, city lights shimmering across the glass. He was a man accustomed to power, a man who controlled every move on the board. But for the first time, a move he hadn't calculated had saved his life. And that move bore a name: Claire Donovan. When he stepped out of the building, he saw her standing under an old awning, hands in her coat pockets, eyes still and deep as a quiet lake. He approached, his voice low, but carrying a rare hint of sincerity. "You didn't have to do that. I could have sent an entire security team to handle him," Claire replied without turning around. "Your security team knows how to protect. I know how to end things." Her words made Nathan smile faintly, a fragile expression caught between admiration and unease. "You know," he said, "people often think power makes someone strong. But sometimes true strength belongs to those who don't want it." Claire turned slightly, her eyes glinting beneath the rain. "I don't want power, Mr. Cole. I want justice for those who were crushed by it." They both fell silent for a moment. The rain tapped steadily, keeping time for two souls hardened by loss. Then Nathan reached into his coat pocket. Instinctively, Claire tensed, every nerve alert. He noticed and gave a soft, knowing smile. "Relax. I'm not armed." From inside his coat, he pulled out a small, intricate object. A gold data drive shaped like a feather, smaller than a thumb. Under the streetlight, it shimmered like fire trapped in metal. Claire froze. Phoenix Drive. Nathan nodded, holding it out to her. "You told him it was in the hands of a third party. Now that's true." She stared at the tiny object, the cause of so much death, so many buried secrets. "You're insane," she whispered. "You trust me. I could disappear with it." "Maybe," Nathan replied, his gaze unwavering. "But if anyone in this world can protect it, it's you. I live in a world where everyone has a price. But you don't." Claire closed her fingers around the drive, feeling its cold, heavy weight. It was small, yet heavier than the past she carried. For a moment, neither spoke. Beneath the rain, the two, one wielding power, the other carrying justice, stood face to face, two opposing forces finding perfect balance. From a distance, police sirens wailed. Nathan turned, his voice calm. "They'll be here in a few minutes. They'll ask questions. Let my lawyer handle it." Claire shook her head. "I don't need a lawyer. I'll just tell the truth." "The truth?" Nathan chuckled softly. "Do you really think they want to hear the truth? They only want the version they can print without costing anyone their job." She didn't answer, just looked up at the rain, her eyes calm and unshaken. "Then let them believe whatever story they want. I believe in what I do." Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes resting on her one last time. "You don't take sides, Claire. You've created balance. And in doing so, you've become the only person neither side dares to touch." Claire met his gaze, her face no longer cold but resolute, as if she had accepted the burden of a role she never chose. "I don't need their fear," she said softly. "I just need them to stop." A flash of lightning tore through the sky, its brilliance washing across her face, strong yet haunted. It was the face of someone who had lost everything and still chose to protect. In that moment, Claire Donovan crossed the line from being a mere observer to becoming the keeper of balance between two worlds, justice and power. The blaring sound of police sirens tore through the silence, shattering the heavy stillness of the night. Red and blue lights flickered against the rain-streaked windows of the Ember Room, bleeding across the wet floor like stains of blood that hadn't yet dried. The door burst open. Dozens of NYPD officers stormed in, guns raised, voices clashing with the crackle of static-filled radios. "Hands up! Drop your weapons!" In the midst of the chaos, Claire Donovan stood tall, utterly unshaken. Calmly, she placed her Glock on the table, the barrel pointed away, then raised both hands. In her right hand, clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white, was the Phoenix Drive, the small piece of metal everyone thought had vanished. "Drop it! Now!" a police officer shouted. Claire looked up, her expression strangely serene. "I can't," she said softly. "This isn't a weapon." The officers exchanged glances, uncertain. The way she stood, composed, unwavering, yet radiating a quiet power, made them hesitate to move too fast. Behind them, Nathan Cole entered, his deep voice cutting through the confusion. "Everything is under control. This is CEO Nathan Cole. This was an attempted robbery, understood?" The officers froze, flashlights turning toward him. A commanding officer stepped forward. "Mr. Cole?" "We received reports of at least 5 armed suspects, and they've all been subdued," Nathan interrupted sharply, his tone like steel. "My employee, Miss Donovan, saved everyone here. She's not a suspect." Claire glanced at him briefly, but said nothing. He was already weaving the truth, thread by thread, turning chaos into a story the world could digest. The police dragged Mark Russo out, his wrists bound. He turned to glare at Claire, half fearful, half defiant. "You think you've won," he rasped. "This isn't over." Claire met his eyes. No hatred, no fear, only a silent promise. When the room began to calm, Nathan stepped closer to her. "I'll handle the press," he murmured. "They'll hear my version, a failed robbery, a hero, and a clean company." She asked quietly, "And what about the truth?" He held her gaze. "The truth doesn't sell on the front page, Claire. But sometimes it saves lives." A young officer approached, asking gently, "Miss Donovan, are you hurt?" She shook her head, her voice tired but steady. "I'm fine. They're not." Her eyes drifted toward the handcuffed men, to the blood seeping from their wounds. There was no triumph there, no pride, only the cold awareness of someone who had survived too many times before. Outside, reporters were already gathering, cameras flashing like a swarm of restless fireflies. Nathan draped his coat over her shoulders, his voice low. "From now on, don't say a word to anyone. Let me handle this." Claire brushed his hand away, not in defiance, but with quiet exhaustion. "I know how to answer the world, Mr. Cole. I just don't know how to answer myself." He fell silent. The words struck him. A man who had negotiated billions suddenly found himself unable to speak. As they stepped outside, flashes exploded in every direction. "Are you the employee who saved the CEO? How did you stop them? Were you military?" Questions fired like bullets, but Claire kept walking, her gaze distant. To the media, she was a hero, the woman who defied death in the Manhattan rain. But to herself, she was something else entirely. Someone who had just awakened the ghost she'd buried 5 years ago. In a dark corner nearby, a man sat inside a shadowed black car, watching it all unfold. His phone vibrated, displaying a single message. Daniel Donovan's sister has it. A crooked smile formed on his face. Richard Hale had received the message, and the war had just begun. A week after the attack at the Ember Room, the headlines began to fade. The bold letters that once filled the front pages were replaced by weather reports, stock updates, and politics. The story of the waitress who saved a billionaire CEO from an armed robbery became a polished anecdote told at elite dinner parties. But no one knew the rest of it. As for Claire Donovan, the woman who had stood in the center of that storm, she lived in silence. She avoided the media, refused every interview, ignored every call. But on Monday morning, a brief message appeared on her phone. Cole Tower, 8:30 in the morning. No notice. Bring nothing. NC Claire read it 3 times. She knew this wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. The boardroom on the top floor of Cole Tower rose above the clouds, its glass walls reflecting the entire Manhattan skyline. From here, one could see the skyscrapers Nathan Cole had helped build, the towering symbols of power across the city. Claire entered. Nathan stood facing the window, his silhouette framed by the soft morning light. He didn't turn around, only spoke quietly. "I heard you turned down every interview. A wise decision." "I don't like talking about things that aren't over," she replied, her voice steady. Nathan turned, a faint smile playing on his lips, the kind of smile that came from seeing something rare in his world, someone untouched by fame. "Sit down, Claire." She did, calm and composed. The room was so quiet they could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Nathan spoke slowly, his eyes fixed on her as if he were reading each thought. "Do you know why I asked you here?" "I'm guessing it's not to say thank you," she said. He let out a soft laugh. "No, I'm not good at gratitude. I'm only good at recognizing value." He walked around the table, his tone steady. "I built Cole Dynamics with data, technology, and the best minds money could buy. But in the world I live in, data isn't enough anymore. Real power doesn't sit in the boardroom. It lives in the shadows, where decisions are made long before the news ever breaks." Claire stayed silent, her eyes following him. He stopped by the window, gazing down at the traffic below, then continued. "I don't need a bodyguard. I need someone who acts before danger appears. Someone who understands that sometimes, to protect the light, you have to step into the gray." The air grew heavier. Claire understood exactly what he meant, and the danger within every word. "You're talking about a covert unit?" she asked softly. Nathan nodded. "Yes, I call it the Gray Division. A small team, no names, no records. They don't protect assets. They protect truth and balance. And I want you to lead it." Claire leaned back, crossing her arms. She had thought she'd left that world behind forever. A world of secret orders, surveillance, threats, and blood. But now, her past stood before her again, wearing the face of opportunity. "I ran from war," she said quietly. "And you want me to walk back into it." "Not war," Nathan corrected. "Order. A new order, built by those willing to see what the law cannot." They looked at each other for a long moment. In Nathan's eyes, she saw a man who had lost faith in the system. In hers, he saw a soul that had fought too long to believe in peace. Finally, she said, "I need a reason." Nathan replied without hesitation, "Because Hale is still alive, and he's looking for the Phoenix Drive." The silence that followed was deep and sharp. Then Claire stood, nodding once. "If I accept, I have conditions." Nathan smiled faintly, weary but satisfied. "I expected that." She walked to the window, looking out at the city bathed in light. The wind hummed softly beyond the glass as her voice rose, low but resolute. "I'll do it, but only on my terms." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then the agreement begins here." Outside, the morning sun began to pierce through the mist. A new chapter was about to unfold, not through victory, but through the rebirth of power in the shadows. The air in the top-floor boardroom of Cole Tower was heavy as steel. Outside, the New York sky was draped in gray clouds, a fine rain falling and sliding down the cold glass panels. Nathan Cole stood at the head of the table, both hands pressed against the glossy black surface, his gaze fixed on the only woman in the room, Claire Donovan. She sat upright, composed, her calm eyes making it seem as though she were negotiating a contract rather than deciding to step back into a battlefield. "I need you to lead the Gray Division," Nathan said slowly, each word measured with precision. You'll have full authority, recruitment, operations, unlimited funding. But every final order goes through me." Claire didn't answer right away. Her fingers intertwined as her gaze drifted toward the vast window behind him, where raindrops ran down the glass like lines of time. "I'll agree," she said at last, her voice low and steady, "but under 2 conditions." Nathan looked up, one brow lifting, intrigued, yet cautious. "I'm listening." "The first condition." Claire looked straight at him, her tone firm. "Richard Hale, you will not retaliate." Nathan fell silent, his lips tightening slightly. She continued, her words deliberate and unwavering. "The balance I created that night must remain intact. No revenge, no covert operations, no financial retribution. He retreats, we let him be." "You're asking me to let go of the man who tried to have me killed?" Nathan asked, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of fire. "I'm asking you to choose survival over obsession," Claire replied. "You, of all people, know that wars never end through vengeance. They only change form, from bullets to power." Nathan's eyes lowered. Deep down, he knew she was right. But accepting it, that was something he rarely did. After a long silence, he gave a slight nod. "Fine. I won't touch Hale." Claire didn't smile, just nodded once. Then she reached into her coat pocket and placed a small, gleaming object on the table between them, the Phoenix Drive. The second condition. Her hand remained resting on the cold metal. "I keep this," she said. Nathan stared at it, then at her. "That belongs to my company." "No," she said firmly. "It belongs to the world." In that moment, her voice no longer sounded like that of a soldier, but of a guardian of power itself. She spoke slowly, deliberately. "The Phoenix Drive doesn't belong to you, and it doesn't belong to Hale. It belongs to whoever can protect balance. I'll keep it, as a promise that if you ever cross the moral line, I'll make everything public." Nathan narrowed his eyes, his tone low. "You're setting conditions on me?" "No," she said evenly. "I'm setting boundaries. For both of us." The air between them was taut, like a wire stretched to breaking. 2 people, one the embodiment of power, the other of justice, stood on opposite ends of a fragile pact where one wrong word could ignite the world. Then Nathan let out a faint laugh, a mixture of surprise and respect. "You really think you can control me?" "No," Claire answered softly but sharply. "I just think you need someone brave enough to say no when everyone else only says yes." This time, Nathan remained silent for a long while. His eyes no longer analyzed, they acknowledged. The woman before him was not an employee, not a bodyguard, not even an ally in the usual sense. She was a counterweight, the one person strong enough to keep his world from slipping entirely into darkness. Finally, Nathan extended his hand, his voice rough but sincere. "The agreement is accepted." Claire shook it firmly, without hesitation. High above the city, a dangerous alliance was born, not built on loyalty, but on boundaries and conditional trust. As the meeting room door closed, Nathan watched her leave and murmured under his breath, "You can't tame a storm, but you can make it stand with you." Outside, the rain began to fade. Through the drifting clouds, the first sunlight broke through the glass, glinting off the Phoenix Drive, glowing like a captured flame, a warning that the battle between light and shadow had only just begun. That morning, Manhattan glowed after the night's rain. From the 90th floor of Cole Tower, the sky was clear and sharp, mirrored in vast panes of glass that looked like an inverted ocean. Inside, Nathan Cole and Claire Donovan stood facing each other, surrounded by light. 2 people from 2 different worlds, bound by a secret that could shift the balance of power itself. On the table between them, the Phoenix Drive lay silent, like a sleeping soul. Its reflection glimmered across Claire's face, making her eyes look both warm and dangerous. Nathan buttoned his suit jacket, his gaze layered with meaning. "I don't often trust people, Claire, but if there's one person in this world I'd gamble on it might be you." Claire didn't respond. She walked toward the window, her eyes fixed on the tiny trails of cars below, a maze of ambition and deceit. Her voice was calm, steady. "Don't put your faith in me, Mr. Cole. Put it in my limits." Nathan smiled faintly. It wasn't humility. It was the declaration of someone who understood balance. An hour later, in the tower's highly secured technical wing, the operations center for the Gray Division officially opened. No nameplate, no records, no trace of its existence. Only rows of dark monitors, an independent security system, and a handful of carefully chosen individuals. Former agents, intelligence specialists, data analysts, all sharing one thing in common. They no longer belonged to the world they once served. Claire walked among them, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Each step echoed on the steel floor, confident and deliberate. No one spoke, but everyone understood. This woman didn't need authority. She was authority. A young technician, a former NSA analyst, stood and greeted her. "Welcome, Director Donovan." She paused, glanced at him, then said quietly, "Don't call me Director. Here, there are no ranks, only missions." The simple words laid the foundation for the Gray Division, a network that operated not through orders, but through trust and an unspoken code. That night, Claire sat alone in her office. The glow of the city reflected off the glass behind her, casting two versions of herself, the ordinary woman and the newly crowned Queen of the Gray. She opened a drawer and took out the golden drive. Her fingertips brushed its smooth surface. It no longer felt like a piece of technology. It felt like a vow. In her mind, the voice of Daniel, her late brother, echoed softly. "Sometimes, to protect what's right, you have to cross its line." She smiled sadly. "I know, Dan, and this time I'll cross it with steady feet." The door opened. Nathan entered unannounced, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you'd still be working. If I stop working, I start thinking. And thinking is worse." He smiled, setting 1 cup down. "The Gray Division is live. The press will never know. The shareholders will never hear. But from now on, you hold more power than some nations dare to imagine." Claire met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "Power is the most addictive thing in the world, Mr. Cole. I don't need it. I just need limits. And if those limits are ever crossed..." She lifted the Phoenix Drive, the golden light reflected in her eyes. "Then I'll be the one to end it, including you." Nathan chuckled softly, neither angry nor afraid. "I know." In that moment, a quiet respect formed between them, not between boss and subordinate, but between 2 people who both understood that truth and power never stand on the same side. When Nathan left, Claire turned back to the window. Outside, the city blazed with light, skyscrapers piercing the clouds, endless windows glowing, and beneath it all, countless secrets hidden behind the shine. She closed her eyes and whispered, as if promising herself, "From now on, there will be no more victims. Not while I'm still standing." On the highest floor of Cole Tower, the Gray Division came to life, and that night, a legend was quietly born. Claire Donovan, the woman who walked through darkness to make sure the light survived. Dawn spread its first light across the towering glass of Cole Tower. The city below came alive after a long night, loud, ambitious, and gleaming as if it had never known exhaustion. From the 90th floor, Claire Donovan stood still, quietly watching the tiny figures moving far beneath her. Each person carried a story, and every story held a choice. And sometimes one wrong choice could bring the entire world down. In her hand, the Phoenix Drive shimmered with a pale golden hue. That small object held more than data. It held truth, power, and the fragile limits of humanity. Claire tightened her grip, feeling the cold metal seep into her fingertips. This thing could save the world, she thought, or burn it to ashes. Behind her, the door opened, footsteps echoing softly. Nathan Cole appeared, his usual boardroom tension stripped away, replaced by something quieter, gratitude mixed with unease. "You haven't slept?" he asked, his voice rough. Claire didn't turn. "I was wondering if we're really any better than the people we've stopped." Nathan stepped beside her, gazing at the ocean of light below. That question never has a clean answer. I used to believe I was doing the right thing, until I realized that right is often just another perspective of power. Claire smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both pain and peace. And that's why the world needs people who fear power. In the control room of the Gray Division, reinforced security panels sealed them off from every system. Dozens of screens glowed with streams of encrypted data, global finance, covert transmissions, satellite maps. It was a living wall of information where every flicker of code could alter the fate of nations. The new recruits were calibrating equipment, former agents, hackers, psychological operatives. They whispered, moved with precision, aware that they had stepped into a realm where no laws existed. At the center, Claire sat with a cold cup of coffee, her eyes fixed on the cascading code. A young technician approached her nervously. "Director, the system's ready. We can start the simulation." Claire nodded. "Good. But remember, from this moment on, what we do isn't for a company. It's to preserve the balance." The young man froze for a moment. He had never heard a leader speak of balance in a room built on control. Elsewhere, they called that idealism. Here, it was survival. That night, Manhattan blazed like molten fire. On the top floor of the tower, Claire and Nathan met again. He placed a folder on the table. A draft of the partnership with Croft Enterprises and the federal government. If we sign, the Gray Division becomes a semi-military unit, fully funded. She looked up, and in return, we become their weapon. Nathan said nothing. She walked to the window, her tone calm but firm. "I didn't build this to be someone's hired gun. I built it to stop the world from falling into the hands of people who don't know when to stop, even if that includes you." Nathan's lips twitched, struck by her words, not with anger, but with something closer to respect. "That's why I chose you." A silence followed. The wind howled outside, like the breath of the city itself. "Claire," he said quietly, "you know, of everyone I've ever met, you're the only one who makes me uncertain I'm still in control." She met his gaze, sharp yet serene. "Because, Mr. Cole, sometimes control is just another form of captivity." Days later, headlines filled the world. Croft Enterprises launched a global data protection initiative hailed as a visionary step for humanity's safety. No one knew that behind the polished press release stood the Gray Division, a ghost organization invisible by design. Deep beneath the tower, Claire entered the underground vault and locked the final sequence on the Phoenix Drive. The screen blinked once. Data secured. Oversight. C. Donovan. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling, the metal door sealed behind her. In the silence, only the low hum of the servers remained. She recalled her mentor's words. "Every generation needs a gatekeeper, but never forget, the gate can trap you too." She opened her eyes and whispered, "I won't be trapped. I'll just watch." A week later, rain fell over the city. On the rooftop, Claire stood without a coat, letting the cold drops sting her skin. Far below, lightning flashed over millions of lives, each chasing, lying, dreaming, surviving. Nathan appeared behind her, carrying an umbrella. "You'll catch a cold," he said. She shook her head. "No. I just want to feel something real. Real. Yes. The world is full of fakes, smiles, loyalties, even justice. But the rain doesn't lie." Nathan watched her, torn between admiration and concern. "Aren't you afraid, Claire? Holding something the whole world wants?" She stared into the distance, her voice steady. "I used to be. But I realized power isn't as dangerous as the silence of good people." Then she turned to him, her eyes unwavering. "If I ever disappear, remember this. There are limits that must never be crossed, not even for the greater good." Nathan nodded slowly, as if sealing a vow. She smiled faintly and stepped out into the open, the rain cascading over her face. In that moment, she became a silhouette against the storm. Fragile, human, yet unyielding. "Not everyone is born to wield power," the narration echoed softly. "Some are chosen to guard it, with compassion, with restraint, and with the fear of harming others." Claire Donovan was no hero. She was proof that between darkness and light, someone must stand on the thinnest line, so both worlds can survive. From the perspective of a social psychologist and an expert on power, the story of Claire Donovan is not merely a battle of wits between justice and ambition, but a portrait of humanity within the gray zone, a place where every decision comes with a price, and sometimes the choice that is less wrong is the closest thing we have to what's right. Claire did not win through strength, but through restraint. She never sought power, yet precisely because of that, she became the only one truly worthy of holding it. That is the greatest paradox of the modern world, that only those who do not crave power can wield it fairly. This story also reminds us that darkness does not vanish when we fight it. It is only contained when we learn to stand on its edge. And perhaps each of us, in our daily lives, carries a small piece of Claire Donovan within, when we must choose between reaction and composure, between anger and compassion, between being right and being wise. To remain balanced, that is true strength. If this story made you pause and reflect, press like to spread the message that real strength lies in how we master ourselves. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the journeys ahead, where we share stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. And finally, leave a comment with a short phrase, a promise to yourself today. Write it below. Stay balanced. Because sometimes, just those two words are enough to remind us that between light and darkness, the most precious thing is not victory, but the courage to keep the line intact.